All right. Again, seeing some familiar names in our attendee list. So welcome back, team. And for anybody who is new and joining us for the first time, welcome. We're really glad that you decided to join us this morning. Should be a great session today. Um, we've done a few of these now. We've had over a year of just really great sessions. But for people who maybe don't know so much about Martechify, we built this to be a community of marketers really focused on continuous learning. We wanted to put together something that really, wasn't just event to event. We wanted topics that would build on each other to really put together a full picture of what marketing looks like now, because it's very different than it looked last year, which was very different than it looked the year before. So I wanted to just put together some great dialogues with leaders who are conquering these challenges and opportunities in MarTech. So we've just really built a great community around that. So it's been a forum series. We've had over 10 sessions that if you want to go check them out on our website, martechify.com, we'll actually be releasing a new website soon that really focuses on all of these great sessions that we've had before. My name is Kyle Herbst. My counterpart Vanessa and I are Martech managers with Ascend, but we really want this to be bigger than Ascend. We have just a great community of sponsors and experts, and we really welcome everybody's feedback in the chat today. So we just, this was built to bring together just these really, really great leaders with great insights, and we've got two amazing people joining us today. So looking forward to a great dialogue. I'll kick it over to Rich to get us started and introduce Nicolette and Adam. But welcome, everybody.
All righty. Good morning and welcome. And special welcome and thank you to our guest experts this morning. We have Adam Cox, who is a director at YETI. He oversees a broad swath of the MarTech tool set there and the platforms. He's going to bring really powerful insights around how to put together the stack and the technologies to enable this kind of advanced Adtech oriented marketing that we're exploring today. Nicolette Harper is VP of Global Marketing and Media at Marriott. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. She leads a large organization, a global organization that is executing the marketing and strategizing the marketing that flows across all these tools and technologies. So I think we have two great and different kinds of perspectives coming together today. So we're looking forward to a vibrant discussion. For everybody who's joining, please do set up your screen on WebEx so that you can see the chat. There will be a chat conversation going on in parallel to the audio and video. So check the little buttons in the lower right, and if you haven't done so yet, please let us know where you're calling in from today and where you're listening from. Please do join in on the chat dialogue that'll be going on. To launch into our content this morning, let me just kind of walk us from our last session to today's. The last session was advanced audience segmentation, leveraging powerful data. And today actually picks up on at least on a couple threads from that conversation. We're looking on Adtech, emerging trends and methods, which does include how do you activate based on the data and how do you manage audiences. That'll be part of our conversation. In terms of the flow today, we'll have a little bit of a framing conversation up front to kind of get us all warmed up to the subject. From there, we'll go into use cases and scenarios that Adam and Nicolette will be sharing with us. We'll be doing this as a live and interactive dialogue all the way through. So in the audio and video, we'll be asking and answering questions. In the chat, we'll be doing the same. So please do join in on the chat discussion. Toward the end, we'll bring the conversation together, and then we'll be fielding questions from the community that's joined this morning. So stay tuned for that. At the end, we may open up the microphones and have a full Q&A discussion, depending on how time flows out. But let's move into it here. I'd like to share a couple thoughts, a couple pieces of perspective, and also I'll invite insights as we go from Nicolette and Adam around some of these framing thoughts. So just to launch into it then, so Adtech kind of starts with a thought exercise around who am I targeting? Who are the individuals? Who are the audiences? Who are the sub-audiences? And in what context? We want to engage people with offers and messages based on what they're up to. So contextual understanding is important. And then thirdly, with what goal in mind? We would like to get messages and content and offers in front of them to move the needle on our business or on our organization. What are those goals? As we move into this step, can we advance the slide? Yeah, so when we kind of break this down, we look at the who am I targeting. In some cases, especially when we're retargeting, we kind of know who is on the other end. But in many cases, we're dealing with anonymous visitors where we know something about them, but we don't necessarily know their name and all the details. Contextually, we think in terms of a customer journey or a customer experience. So we do get behavioral data signals that tell us or signal where the customer is in the journey. That matters as we think about optimizing content, and then business goals we already spoke to. As we kind of move further into the implications for technology on the next slide, kind of the first slice of this is how will I identify and manage all these audiences and personas. And there are particular components of a tech stack that enable that and processes that go with that are important to explore. On the next slide, then we think about the activation. How do we activate and how do we bring in the right and optimum content and offers for our target? And then in the end, we've got to decide with what platform or tool or partner are we going to get that message out there. So on the next slide, the picture paints out a step further. We've got processes and technologies that manage our targets and our audiences. We've got processes and technologies that harness all our content and offers that are available for various audiences. We've got some logical processes in between that starts to match up targets with offers and content. And then in the end, we've got to execute out through the platforms and via partners that are available. So we kind of pause there and get some perspective from Adam and Nicolette. What would you say about the picture here? And what would you add or change about it?
Yeah, I mean, this definitely amplifies, the architecture I'm going to show. And a lot of people, tend to kind of underemphasize organizing all of their content, whether that be, deals and offers, but also creative content. If you have highly curated, video, audio, podcasts, those media are now becoming a big part of how you speak to your customer.
Big time.
And maybe just to add, as like Adam and I get into some of the content that we'll share, we kind of show both sides of the coin, if you will, from that framing perspective on both the Martech, Adtech setup, as well as how do you actually use all that data and extract all the data. So I think this will fit nicely.
All right, super good. Well, let's get into it. I think Adam's going to lead us off here. And on the next slide, here's Adam again, and he runs very deep on the technology. Adam, feel free to share more about your experience and your work, and then take us in. We'd love to see the picture you've got to paint for us here.
Yeah, thanks for the tee up, Rich. Adam Cox, as Rich mentioned, I'm the technologist, so I'll be giving you a bit of a technologist perspective here, but hope to lay it out in the context of business use cases at YETI. I've been at YETI for about 5 years. During that 5 years, YETI has grown rapidly. It's been a bit of a rocket ship. That growth didn't slow down during COVID. We actually, benefited somewhat during the pandemic. A lot of people rediscovered the outdoors and were sitting at home doing some retail therapy, buying products, and YETI products were a great small, cups were a small dollar item to make people feel good, you know, as they had some dollars to spend. I've held similar positions at Travelocity and Asurion. And one of the great things about YETI has been the opportunity to start from scratch. When I got to YETI, there really was no data and analytics stack or martech stack. So it's been a real blast to not have to clean up someone else's mess and really start fresh and build an architecture that we could be proud of. If you would go to the next slide, excuse me. So I laid out some of our strategic priorities. This is from our investor deck, but you know, the current strategy at YETI is around expanding our customer base and introducing new products, mostly through direct consumer. And you know, we have a bit of a unique challenge in that, you know, YETI builds a product that's indestructible. It's the last cooler you'll ever buy. So to drive repeat purchase and to expand our customer base, we have to do two things. We have to find ways to compel people to come back, whether that's through customization or new colorways on products that you may like our cups, or just product innovation, expanding into categories, some of which I'm going to show you. You may not even know that YETI produces. So if you would go to the next slide. The other way that YETI is growing is in the communities that we talk to. YETI is definitely a lifestyle brand. Most of our marketing is not overly commercialized. You won't see us, you know, pushing a lot of product in our videos we produce or the podcasts that we generate. A lot of the imagery on our site is very lifestyle heavy. We of course do feature the product, but it's always around, you know, the lifestyles that that are associated with our brand. Back in 2006, you know, YETI's a relatively young company. We started with two main communities. Our founders were avid outdoorsmen, and they used their coolers as a casting platform on their boats. And they kept standing on these cheap igloo coolers and collapsing the lids. And they said, you know, there's got to be something better than this. And they saw, you know, rotomolding in the kayak industry and how sturdy these kayaks were. And they said, well, let's go build a cooler the same way that kayaks are built. And that was the birth of YETI, an indestructible cooler you could stand on all day on your boat, you know, in salt water and hold ice, you know, for days. So the first communities we spoke to, of course, were fishing and hunting. But as we've expanded geographically and as we've expanded our product base, we've looked for other communities that fit our brand well. And you can see now we speak to 13 kind of key communities that are on brand for us, and have ambassadors across all those. So a lot of our creative content is developed, you know, specifically with, say, you know, ski snowboarding in mind, or ranch in mind, or rodeo. We have a lot of movies we do. We have podcasts from these ambassadors. So a lot of rich community-based content. So if you would, next slide. Yeah, so this is the product catalog and how it's evolved over the last couple of years. And one of the things, you know, we really focus on in our marketing is in our big analytic use case is figuring out, you know, what are people's journeys through our product catalog. Most people start with a low dollar item. Most people's introduction to the YETI brand today is our drinkware. And what we try to do is we try to figure out what journeys do these different communities go through. So if you're into boating, obviously we're going to put you on a curriculum, you know, that focuses on soft cooler, hard cooler. People who've expressed an interest, we have some content on the site around dogs, and we figured out that dog lovers love our dog bowls. So, you know, if you've clicked on the dog bowl, then going to put you on the dog curriculum. And interestingly, we go through our search terms on the site, and dog bowl is like number 2 consistently. So we have pushed dogs up even to the top level of our global nav on the website, recognizing that trend. So our one of our huge kind of analytic endeavors is to find these clusters of buyers and figure out how have they moved through the product categories, and then in our marketing campaigns put them on that curriculum, see if they're clicking, see if they're converting, and if they aren't, put them back on the generic brand calendar. We have product releases every quarter and color releases, so we're always kind of A/B testing the personalized curriculum versus the generic brand calendar. So if you would go to the next slide, I'm going to talk a bit about the technology challenge to implement those marketing strategies. As we looked at building out a Martech stack to accomplish those goals, it was a bit overwhelming, right? And this is a stat from chiefmartech.com I ran across this month that really resonated with me as I looked at building the stack out, and the number of vendors that would contact me, or the number of vendors I found. Back in 2011, there were only about 150 companies that called themselves Martech, and today it's 8,000. So this space has just exploded. There's tons of venture capital flowing in to the space. So we had to really figure out, okay, what's the right recipe for us? Where should we focus our efforts? How should we build a foundation that we can then expand on? So if you would, the next slide, I'll show you. This is how we've essentially organized our Martech stack. Tried to keep it relatively simple, and it echoes what Rich talked about earlier. We have our Martech stack organized into content platforms and analytics and activation. So content platforms, like I said, are all about organizing and curating not only YETI generated content, our videos and blog posts and even podcasts, but also user generated content that we get from product reviews and product content that we have in our PIM. And we organize those not just around our product catalog, but also around, we tag a lot of our imagery, especially our lifestyle imagery, around those communities I showed earlier, so that we can programmatically call from our DAM images for fishing or hunting or rodeo and insert them dynamically into like email campaigns. And then, so the right side of the equation then is all about measuring engagement, what you're clicking on, what you're responding to in our CDP segment, audiencing you, and then pushing out campaigns through either Braze, our email platform, or various different marketing channels. So a double click on the next slide on that architecture. This is how it lays out from the data acquisition side on the left, our e-commerce platform and our email platform. In our retail stores, if you give us your email information as you check out, we capture that. And then we have some forms on the site, something we call like our preference center, where we ask you to tell us about yourself. Tell us what you're interested in. Are you interested in fishing, or are you interested in rodeo, etc.? So that's one way we segment you. We segment you based on what you've clicked on, both product wise, but also content wise on like our ambassador pages. And so the heart of our engine there is our CDP and our data warehouse in Google BigQuery. And so then we take those audiences and the content we have in our DAM and our PIM, and we pump that out through various different paid channels and email channels. And then we measure that up in the top with our web analytics stack. And then also we have session replay and clickstream analytics, so we can look at what you're clicking on in quantum metric. And then last slide, by now, hopefully you're not bored with system diagrams. But last slide is our content platform. So this shows not only all the various different sources of content, but more importantly, YETI's on digital shelves beyond our own website and our Amazon marketplace. We're on 40 plus websites, for our distributors, Dick's, REI, Cabela's, Ace. So we make sure that the content they're displaying on their e-commerce channels conforms to our brand standards and publish out to them our product, verbiage, text specs, imagery via our PIM Salsify. So we want to control the experience not only on our digital channels, but our distributors' digital channels. So that's how we do it at YETI. It's been a blast to build this platform out. It's definitely fun to not just have to push the product, but also to get to push the lifestyle.
Very cool. Thanks, Adam. Hey, just to play back what I'm hearing, and I'm sharing it this way just to stimulate conversation and additional questions from the community involved here. But so what I see is that you have a deep understanding of your audience and sub-audiences, and it's mainly driven around lifestyles, which is interests, hunting, fishing, etc. And then you have kind of mapped out then kind of the typical journey that people go through, the typical journey, and how that translates into a curriculum or a learning path to become familiar with additional products. So all of that has kind of been, it sounds like, modeled out, and that gives you kind of a data structure then around which you can organize all your content and then activate ultimately. And it looks to me like the harnessing the audiences in your CDP segment is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And then bringing the content together via the product information, the PIM platform, and the DAM. Bringing that together is kind of how the whole stack connects. Am I playing that back reliably, or does that trigger any questions from others?
That's right. That's how the magic happens.
All right. Fire away, Nicolette, if you have questions along the way. But I think maybe the second thing I'm seeing, Adam, is a lot of curation. So how to put together those frameworks, those data frameworks, and then how to curate data so that, via your tagging tools, et cetera, so that you can actually make this all work. That's a big exercise, it looks like.
It is. And, that is a big kind of human effort, a lot of alignment. We had to get a lot of alignment around the taxonomy, a lot of healthy debate over what should and should not be in the taxonomy. And it took probably longer to get the people aligned on the taxonomy than it did to actually implement and tag the content.
I guess I'm not shocked because getting a human organization aligned around all those processes, the taxonomy, the curation required, very, very big deal.
Yep.
All right. Taxonomy is the hardest part, Nicolette says. Yeah, what are your thoughts, Nicolette?
Yeah, because your data is only as good as the tagging and the taxonomy is happening, and trying to get, like in our case, the globe to all herding the cats to get everybody moving in the same direction and be really consistent. Every time a new agency person starts at the company, make sure that they're actually using it, so you're not having to manually stitch things together, is like a constant firefight for sure. But because otherwise you're not going to get down to the creative and the messaging level, and you're really only going to be able to get down to like maybe the partner channel level, and then we can inform creative and brand and everything that goes around content. So it's a huge undertaking. It's worth the effort to do it right, and be like, and I do mean this, like, ruthless and making sure that everybody follows it. because again, the output's only as good as the input.
For sure.
Makes great sense. Why don't we shift over to Nicolette? I know you've got some storytelling to do here, and as a reminder for everybody, Nicolette leads a large organization, global. There are many countries and languages involved, many properties involved, a whole lot of data considerations and a lot of complexity that she oversees. So yeah, take it away, Nicolette. Feel free to share more about the work you're doing in your background, and then we'd love to hear the story.
Yeah, absolutely. But first off, just love that Adam's drinking out of a YETI coffee mug right now, and very on brand. And I have most of those products on your sheet. And so you just heard from Adam kind of talking about some of the diagrams and how it's all stitched together. I'm going to look at it from a slightly different lens on the Adtech side, but really kind of just kicking off and saying that, look, I think we've all kind of moved away from being data poor, and now it's really about being, we're all data rich, but now the challenge is, how do you extract that data from all these disparate places? How do you actually stitch it together and actually activate on it in a very meaningful way? And so for us, that meant really kind of starting with some guiding principles along the way, and how we think about who do we work with, because we get constant, at least 10 a day, different partners and vendors trying to hit us up for various things, and how do you choose the right one and who are the right ones to work with. But just also to take a step back too, so I'm over Marriott, all of media for the entire company. That's all 30 brands globally, as well as all the other P&Ls for the company. If anybody's putting an ad or marketing out there in the wild, if you will, that's coming from my group. And so a lot of things to consider. So how we think about these guiding principles when we start thinking about the ad tech side of the house is number one is, how do we optimize with the information and the data and the platforms and the tools that we have today to make that as seamless and effective as possible while we're building for the future. And there's always that fine balance, hitting the short-term wins as well as kind of building for long-term. My team knows this is a motto of mine. I'm like, move faster. So like, how do we move faster? Is there a way to cut down the time to market in half? Are we able to go at it through an agile development phase and kind of put it out there? 80% done is better than nothing that's perfect that takes forever to build or what have you. And really, really important for Marriott specifically is, are the processes and decisions that we're making today scalable? And the reason that's so critical is kind of what Rich teed it up was, we're in 133 countries around the world. We're the largest hotel company in the world. And with that comes scale problems, because no one partner is big enough for us, no matter where we're at. And then how do you piece all that together in a way that makes a lot of sense, that's scalable, that's usable, a bit of mass market on that, but then how do you make that as specific down all the way down to the hotel level? Because if the hotel is not winning, then the company is not winning. So a lot of thought went into kind of how we went to out it. So if you want to go to the next slide. So the biggest thing is we had to completely reevaluate who we were working with, how we were working, process-wise, and then how we're going to connect it together with Adtech, whether it's stuff that we're going to build ourselves or we're going to partner with externally. So if you want to kind of do the next build. So when we started with process, for us, on the marketing and the media side, one, it's like, we're never going to be able to optimize every little thing without having a fluid budget, a fluid plan, and a fluid media authorization with our agency. So essentially, we stripped all the nonsense away. We used to go to market with all these, I call them baby campaigns. Every brand had their own little budget and they would do whatever. And some budgets were big. They weren't, small budgets, and some were extremely small, and everything in between. But I equate that with a sparkler versus Disney fireworks. And so we're like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go to market as a portfolio-led strategy, and essentially all boats rise. And so then the trick becomes like, where do each of those brands and products kind of play within the customer journey? And then like, how do you speak to that and find those audiences? But by building a plan that can move fluid by water, capturing demand as it arose, allowed us a lot more flexibility and efficiency. And frankly, we're going to beat and exceed 2019 from our group specifically. 2019 revenue numbers, as well as just the return on investment. So huge strides on that. The other big thing was who are we working with? So I mean, you saw the diagrams earlier from Adam. You have to be really particular on who you decide to work with. And if you're going to work with them, you got to know that you're going to be sharing a lot of data with them, way more than our comfort level would have been maybe 5 years ago. You're getting married to this this partner, and you need to be like okay with that. So that does mean things like a lot less partners, but you're going to have a deeper relationship, which means you're going to have probably a direct data agreement. It's not always going to be through like your agency, for example. The other thing is buying the media as programmatic as possible through a lot of these partners, because then it allows you that agility to move around. And just to put it in context, specifically for the travel industry, as we were the ones hit the hardest during the pandemic, is occupancy, which used to be in the 90s, went down 90%. Some hotels weren't even open and still aren't open, actually. And some occupancy was down into the single digits, like you'd have a couple people into an entire hotel. And so we had to really pivot on how we went to market, hence all these new paths and go-to-market strategy, which also means we had to be able to move the media around every time the little green shoot shot up around the world, and making sure that we were partnering with that. And so with that, all that partner data, as well as all the copious amounts of data we built in Datarama with COVID-related data, government regulations, mobility data from Apple and Google. So we knew exactly when and where to place our media. And because of the way we were buying it, we're able to do so. And then, of course, more global joint business plans so that we're all kind of moving in the same direction, and we can benefit from a lot of those value adds. And then finally, kind of getting, since this conversation is very focused on the ad tech side of the house, is a couple different things. One, given that we had fewer resources, fewer people, and we still needed to let the hotels win, how do we go to market from that? So one, we completely revamped our hotel level marketing platform. We baked in a lot of machine learning on what exactly is the opportunity for every single hotel around the world, given all those variables that we just talked about in that dashboard. So they knew exactly what the right amount to spend was. And then in addition to that machine learning around that, we built a digital media planner, because you got to remember, a lot of these hotels no longer had marketing experts. You have the GM or the rev management guy, trying to figure all this out. So we knew that they had to focus on operations and not necessarily running marketing. So we built an easy planner, if you will, that would help them distribute the opportunity that we had already surfaced against all the channels that made the most sense to drive the biggest impact for them. And then we build a bunch of other programs on top of that, on basically where do you put your next dollar and your next dollar, so that every hotel around the world, depending on what their budget levels, like resorts will have more, knew exactly what the next step was to make sure that nobody's wasting any dollars as we continue to go through recovery. The next piece was really going deep and with dynamic creative optimization, so DCO. We have a third party that we use that is helpful, but we also optimize directly within the DSP, because sometimes having too many layers, you start to put your own rules around that and limit some of that optimization. So we dynamically pull in the lowest rate, guaranteed from our site, which changes umpteen times a day, so we can be at rate parity with the online travel agencies like an Expedia. We're pulling in dynamic imagery and the hotel information and everything like that to build these ads in real time in order to help them surface the right kind of information with the right consumer. In addition to that, we also have DCE that we're testing through this year, which is video specific. And so that's dynamic creative engine. And the fundamental difference, which is really interesting, So DCO is, I put a bunch of ads dynamically in market and the best one essentially wins. The difference for DCE is I put 5 videos into market. The machine will automatically on its own create a 6th video with all the best parts of the other 5 videos. So pretty powerful. The biggest hurdle actually on that one isn't the work to do it, is to get the brand team okay with the fact of this beautiful baby commercial that they just made. We're going to have to break that up in pieces and put it back together. And so that one's a bit more of a change management than it is a tech issue. Finally, in order to help the whole world win and move fast and jump on different trends and things that are happening, for example, pet-friendly travel and work from anywhere and those kinds of trends like that, have been, here for the last 18 months or so. We built an in-house proprietary digital marketing ad builder tool that essentially allows anybody around the world that's approved or whatever to build social media ads, display, video, dynamic, rich media, you name it. We'll be factoring a lot more. We're actually building something brand new that never existed with Google. So direct connect from that tool into Campaign Manager, so we can just be more efficient. Eventually that'll be dynamic. So helping people to be able to build ads in essentially in real time, so that you're not having to wait that 6 to 8 week turnaround, if you will, from an agency, as well as save on some production costs. And then we all look like we're from the same company, because there was a lot of crazy stuff out there from all the hotels and trying to herd those cats. And then finally, of course, we're all knee deep in the testing for identity solutions. So we've kind of identified the first 3 partners we're going to test with. When we think about identity solutions, the answer is not which one, but which ones. And as we think about a solution, again, for 133 countries, it's going to be stitching a lot of that together, and how do we do that in a way that makes the most sense without giving all of our data away, if you will, and how do we start to do that? And so a CDP isn't the end all be all. That's foundational for sure. But you're going to have multiple clean rooms. Some of the walled gardens are going to have their own, obviously, that you're not going to be able to do anything with, and then you're going to have your own, and it's going to be an interesting time. And our goal is basically just test the crap out of everything for the next 14 months, I guess, at this point. So come 2023, we're all prepared as much as humanly possible. So it's kind of how we've taken the thing from pulling, all this brand new go-to-market strategy. How do we build the right tech, and then how do we build the right systems to support it? So hopefully that was helpful for you guys.
Super great. Thank you, Nicolette. So I've got a question. I'd love to hear just a little more on a particular topic that actually wasn't in my framework, but I think it comes out vividly in the challenge, in the business challenge that you're dealing with, which is how do you optimize your budgets across a whole planet with 130 different countries, 30 different brands, and my goodness, in the pandemic phase, when you have all the various countries and different states of affairs in terms of COVID restrictions, travel restrictions, et cetera. I mean, just so there's a whole layer in there around how do you optimize your investments and make sure you're spending money in the right places with the right brands and getting a return. Would love to hear just, anything else you can share about just how you manage that?
Well, first was a little on the change management side. I had to get all the different channel owners on my team and around the world to not be precious about it. I'm like, look, if your channel, if social's not performing, I'm gonna take all your money and I'm gonna put it over search, and you just need to get over it, because we're here to win and we're here to drive recovery so hotels can stay open. And then we can bring our team back. And so that there was a little bit of the change management component. The other piece was what we call a trigger dashboard that we built in partnership with the agency that pulled in all those variables from around the world, so that when there was peaks of opportunity, because we saw the data from Google and Apple that people were actually willing to leave their home and they were willing to drive 50 miles. Okay, well, maybe some drive trips are in order and those kinds of things. So a lot of testing through that. And the fact that we did start pulling our money together in a way that we could be fluid with the money based on where the opportunity was. Sure, we go to market with an idea of how that's going to net out, but then we essentially let the data decide on how we're going to do that, and kind of pairing source and destination, where you're at and where you want to go, so that we can look at the best of both worlds and kind of fact check ourselves when we're doing the marketing. So a lot of testing, the brand components, and bringing the right product in at the right time. It's an ongoing piece, but a lot of it's first party data, attitudinal, past purchases, behavior on the site, those kinds of things, to know that, oh, you have a propensity for luxury collections. There's not a St. Regis in your city that you're looking at, but maybe there's a Ritz Carlton, for example. Those type of things, to make sure that you're surfacing the right thing. And then where in the funnel does it make sense to bring in those different products? Because I'd argue that it's not every part in the funnel, that there's moments in time that make more sense than others.
Great point. Adam, what's your take on this? Well, kind of what thoughts does it trigger for you?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I'm fascinated by is I think you call it the dynamic content engine, the video splicing or whatever. Is that something you guys built in-house, or did you find a partner that was able to provide that solution?
Great question. We did not build that one. That one is pretty sophisticated, and it is video splicing, but my biggest thing on that is, and it does have deep learning. So it knows that this is a lady on a kayak on a lake floating by the mountain kind of thing. So there's a ton of metadata that gets tagged in this. But the biggest thing is it doesn't break the story arc, which I think is a really important one. Otherwise, it just feels like this hodgepodge of like video vignettes, if you will. But it is a party. And then the way that that one works is it's based on a CPM purchase. So there's no typical cost for that, but you're paying for it based on the media buy.
Very cool. I may have to explore that idea with you at some point.
Can you say more, Nicolette, around, you mentioned story arc, when you have the machines making a lot of the decisions, highly automated tool sets, how does that live? How do you bring that together so that it is kind of delivering a coherent experience over time to your targets?
Yeah, depending on how you build the story, like obviously a mobile story arc is very different. I like to equate it, the difference between mobile versus a sit back TV experience on the story arc is the story arc for TV is almost like an EDM song, where you have this long kind of build, and this grandiose like big bang thing at the end and all the action, and it's awesome. And then the difference for video story arc is more of a Michael Bay film, where it's just a bunch of explosions at the beginning for no apparent reason, but then it goes in and tells you why. And so based on however you structure that, you have to put the decision logic moments in time to where, in this first part of the story arc, we can only optimize with this set of videos, for example. So that way it's not pulling something from the end and putting it at the beginning, and then all of a sudden the story doesn't make sense. So you just have to put some of that criteria parameter in place in order to make the most sense. So.
Got it. So a human thought process, a strategic thought process kind of articulates the story arc, I'm sure informed by analytics, and then that framework is then embedded into the machine learning logic so that you're optimizing, within a story arc, if I'm reading you right. And then you've got all your content and offers, et cetera, tagged to work with that same framework.
Yeah, and the deep learning is when essentially like the video is being read, if you will, to understand kind of what's actually being shown in the video. Is pretty sophisticated, which is also helpful for tagging and taxonomy and potential points of interest when we're thinking about whether it be contextual or whatever the case might be, as well as informing creative and messaging the next time they go shoot some whatever commercial.
Got it. Fascinating stuff. And I'm seeing similarities and some differences between the stories you guys have shared, the scenarios you've shared here. Why don't we roll forward with the slides? So, how do we connect these dots? If we can go forward one more slide. So I think I'm hearing, actually back a slide, my apologies. Let's capture some thoughts on in here. So what I'm seeing is there is a framework in both businesses that we're talking about here. On the YETI side, we have a journey framework. We translate that into curricula. On the Marriott side, we do have story arcs at work, and that seems like a similarity. Seems like on the Marriott side, given the global complexity of the situation, you need to lean on the AI and machine learning really, really hard. I don't know. I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts. You know, what's similar here? What's different here between the situations?
I mean, I think Nicolette, you obviously have a much larger organization to deal with and a lot more people to get aligned. A small team, can make decisions probably faster. And so I don't envy you in having to drive some very important strategic objectives with the inertia of a big organization. So kudos to you on that.
Yeah, that takes tenacity and pushing that rock uphill, if you will, for sure. But it's the right thing to do for the company. And I think the connectivity point is really just two lens. Like Adam's already built it. We would have loved to have a framework like that. I think our challenge too is, in case nobody knows this, most of the Marriott properties, hotels, all 30 brands are franchise owned. These are 30-year contracts. We can't force them to do a whole lot until those contracts re-up or do some kind of amendment. So getting them to all upgrade in certain technology, we gotta let we gotta let some of that kind of play out. And so there's definitely some challenges. So sometimes we build it where we can, sometimes we partner where we can. But I mean, we're all trying to build the most simplistic model with the fewest partners as possible. And then it just, like I said, putting that on a global scale does add a little bit of complexity. So, but
Interesting.
I envy your framework, but yeah.
So whereas the YETI team can be a little more prescriptive and put some very specific design and optimizations and things for a large organization like Marriott, you take a framework out to market and you have to, I don't know what the word is, negotiate or work it with the franchise partners. Ultimately, they have that extra layer in there that makes it even more challenging sometimes. Interesting. Let's open up to the floor, if you will. Well, we can open up mics if possible, or use chat. But I'd love to hear what questions we have from the community.
Very quiet group today. It's okay. Dallas and Austin are my old stomping ground. I went to SMU, so feel free to bring in that Southern charm and hospitality.
I will comment that the data and really understanding the people and their personas and where they are in their journey with your product seems very consistent and very consistent with a lot of the client work that we do. And it just really puts a punctuation mark around being able to serve up content that's relevant to them based on where they are in their journey, and not trying to get, a round peg in a square hole or vice versa. And very important pieces there with the data.
Yeah, I'm thinking back, Nicolette, too, to my days at Travelocity. One of the challenges we had with the hotels, who published their content on the Sabre distribution network, was they all wanted to proclaim that they had a great pool or they all had a great gym. And we found that it was hard to find differentiation, and say, well, this one actually does have a great pool. One of the projects we did was to mine the review data and actually cluster words in the customer reviews to to surface the hotels that actually did get, great pool or great gym, or friendly staff. So that was a way for us to get around the phenomenon of every hotel wants to claim that they have friendly staff.
Are you talking about Traversify?
This was something we did at Travelocity. It was
Yeah.
an in-house solution that we built.
Okay. There's a couple third parties that do that. We actually have a bit of that on our own channels, just to help with the whole filtering of this is a lifestyle or a great wellness, certainly a lot of work to do, but yeah, everybody thinks they're a snowflake, so.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, let's do this. Let's kind of move. We'll do a few announcements around upcoming Martechify sessions and things like that, and then let's come back. We'll reopen the mics and open the conversation at the end as well to gather more advice and wisdom. But for right now, let's. Vanessa, would you like to kind of share the content around what's coming up?
Yeah, thank you so much for joining today, and thank you to the speakers. That was such an awesome presentation. We will definitely be following up with the recording and presentation deck after this, in case you have anyone else on your team who would like to hear about this content that we've shared today, as well as would love to get your feedback on what you thought about today's session and any other topics that you would have in mind for a future Martechify. And then for upcoming, we do have one last session to wrap up the year. We're super excited to talk about CDPs, demystifying the topic, as well as just talking about the source of truth for customer-driven marketing, as well as trends and methods for CDPs. And we'd love to have you join on November 18th. So this is the RSVP link, and I'll ping it in the chat as well. And then on top of that, we do also have dedicated deep dives. I think next session will definitely look like it could spin off into a deep dive as well, as far as CDPs and any other topics that would come out of that. But if you have any interest in a particular deep dive that you would like to do, either for your organization or just a future Martechify deep dive, would love to get your thoughts on that. So feel free to contact us or shoot us a note on that as well. But yeah, back to you, Rich.
Okay, and if I can, let's stay on deep dives for just a second. So deep dives in the Martechify community are typically smaller group sessions. The time frame is different. In some cases, they're multi-sessions, and they run deeper on a specific topic. So this last year, we piloted a first deep dive called the Boot Camp, and it was a particular deep dive focused on helping marketing professionals who have not had a chance to intersect with kind of the full range of typical tech stack tools to become rapidly acquainted and gain some facility, some actual hands-on facility in the tool set. So that was the first one, was the Boot Camp. I do sense one coming up around data and data harnessing, coming off our last session, which was segmentation, advanced segmentation, and our next session, which will be CDPs. I do think by the time we get into, say, late January, early February, it'll be time for a deep dive around that subject as well. Given that we're approaching the end of the year, we're not trying to schedule deep dives as we go into November, December. Usually that's kind of a challenging time to bring off those kind of sessions, but we are thinking actively around late January, February, and March, and at this point in time, still collecting feedback and input as to what might be most valuable. Either deep dives for the whole community, or it's also possible to do deep dives at a corporate level for a particular organization. So both of those are possible. Okay, so let's kind of, I want to see what other questions we have. Feel free to pipe in, and we can unmute. Folks can unmute if you want, and we can ask questions. Let me, before we kind of open up questions, I'd love to kind of get, based on where we are right now, Nicolette and Adam, your thoughts around advice from our experts or wisdom to share. So if we can do that's a couple slides back, Vanessa, but let's kind of go back there. I'd love to hear you guys, is there any kind of summary level advice that you would have for the community here?
I guess I can go ahead and kick it off. The biggest piece of advice is do not underestimate bringing your leaders along the journey. If you don't have leadership buy-in to building this tech doesn't take a year to build, it takes multiple years to build a lot of times. And so you got to be able to make sure you have that CapEx over those time periods. And buy-in for resources to support it and ongoing. So bringing your leadership along as well as your team to understand the why behind why you're doing things quite a bit differently. And then privacy and legal, become best friends with them, because the more of these data agreements that you have. So what we did is we quit doing deals like partner by partner. Instead, we focused on data tiers. What data am I sharing? What category does this fall in? And what kind of agreement is required or IT scrutiny based on the data tiers? And so that is one interesting way to look at like how to approach that.
Yeah, I'd echo both of those things. In my case, educating our executive team on, what machine learning means for YETI, and, is this stuff, just a bunch of technical jargon, or explaining it really in terms they can understand has been a challenge, but it's something that you have to be very patient with and make sure that you invest a lot of time in to get the CapEx, to get the backing of the executive team for sure. And then same thing with privacy and legal. We've we've invested a lot of time in trying to build system documentation that our privacy and legal team can understand, and that they can bump up against GDPR and CCPA and the upcoming CPRA, and say, okay, well, what technology is proposing seems to, pass what the requirements are. And so translating technology solution to privacy and legal requirements has taken a lot of time too.
Perfect. Thank you. A common message here. I like the word education, because I see a lot of organizations where senior leadership is in very much a learning curve. And of course, it's a moving target. The technology, the legal concerns, privacy, it's a moving target in terms of technology and policy. And I would imagine very hard for a leadership, the top leadership team to have their arms around that. So I would think education is a real key word here.
We have a good question here from the chat. Stephanie wants to know, Adam, can you discuss how to stitch together the digital activity for unknown to known leads, or AKA the dark web? Your customers out there and we don't know who they are.
Yeah, so our CDP does a lot of that. It provides what's called an identify event. So it takes anonymous session data from our web sessions, and it tries to recognize, either that same person anonymously, all the past sessions via their IP address, or the device ID on their computer, or their Google Analytics ID. So it triangulates based on a couple of session data points, as well as past purchase data. So, if somebody has created a profile and we have their email address and we have the sessions associated with that person, the CDP uses primarily IP address and device ID and cookies to do that for us. As Nicolette mentioned, also there are other there are other identity resolution parties out there beyond your CDP that can do an even better job of that. So Nicolette, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it. The biggest identifier is hashed email, except if you guys operate in China, and a lot of APAC is going to be mobile. So you'll have to figure that one out.
Interesting. What other questions?
There was a question maybe for you, Adam, around being too creepy with your one-to-one marketing.
Gosh, I'm trying to think about, yeah. For us, the one-to-one marketing, we're mainly inserting brand imagery, or I'm sorry, lifestyle imagery. We haven't really received, any kind of complaints from people like, oh, I see that you understand I'm a fisherman. In some cases, people are expressly telling us, that they are interested in fishing. So it's subtle from the perspective of, the content, the imagery is just personalized, stylized to something that we think you would like. We're not we're not doing a lot of like, hey, Nicolette, we see you clicked on dog bowls, so we're staying away from that kind of stuff.
Good deal.
And from a Marriott perspective, customers want us to remember all those things about them, because when you get in your room, you want that memory foam pillow or whatever your preference is. You want that high floor, you want it away from the elevator, you want to face the ocean, or whatever those things are. And if we don't like pay attention to that stuff, then not that we get it all right all the time, but so people, if you are a loyal customer and you're part of the program, you want us to know that stuff. If you're not, like, frankly, identifying that you're Jennifer or Sam, like, that's near impossible anyway, especially when you get down more and more into the cookieless world, where like you've got clusters of probably about 100 people. So like you're not getting down to that level of creepiness, if you will.
Sounds good. Other questions? I think I had a technology question. I think, Adam, on your side, so you've got that PIM in the stack. A lot of organizations we work with do not have, product information management in the stack. Just curious insights as to, how did you spot the need for that, and how does that fit? How does that fit in the architecture?
One of the kind of tipping points for us investing in a PIM was delayed product launches. So getting all of the content together for not only our e-commerce channel, but our Amazon channel, and then all of our distributors, was taking a long time. And in some cases, we weren't getting it to all channels at the same time. And we're getting a lot of pushback from our distributors that, hey, it looks like, company X is getting your product information before me. So we looked at not only the lost revenue in terms of pulling product launches off on time, but also just the amount of sales time and energy that was going into getting content out to distributors that we would prefer they would, be focusing on selling into their customer base. Not to mention it was just chaos. And so we had to bring some order to the chaos.
Yeah, very great. Do we have other questions? All righty. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up then. Thank you very much again. Thank you. Special thank you, Nicolette and Adam, for lending your wisdom today. Fascinating content, fascinating insights, and much, much appreciated.